Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Fish Farmers webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of land-based strategy. An impressive amount of investment is pouring into land-based fish farming around the world, from Scandinavia and the Middle East to Florida and Japan. But can the technology and biology combine to ensure this industry has a profitable future? We've got a great panel of experts for this, the latest in our Aqua Agenda series of webinars. Thue Holm is managing partner at Aquafounders Capital and a director of the Black Cod Company. Paul Howes is manager at the Centre for Sustainable Aquatic Research at the University of Swansea. And Trond Schaug-Pettersen is CEO of Norwegian land-based fish farming company Salmon Evolution, and we'll hear a little bit more about the detail of that very shortly. Thue, maybe we could start with you. You set up Aquafounders Capital with fellow entrepreneur Ohad Maiman to invest in aquaculture ventures. What are your current projects?
That was our initial goal, right? The way me and Ohad got together is that we are side channels, you can say, or within our network, found out that we had a very similar vision of where the RAS land-based space should go in the future. What are the bottlenecks? What are the things that really is limiting in the industry? And we have both experienced on the hard way in our work lives in Kingfish and Sapphire what really are a lot of the issues, right? And so we were very aligned, and therefore we started exploring how to work together. And one of the first ideas was to do more in investing. You can say approach more like a VC approach. But then we quickly found out that we maybe not that much bankers and more entrepreneurs. And so we set out to challenge two things that we think that are very important. One thing is high value species. We really think that local produced high value species can really give that price point that a RAS farm needs, and you can also deliver a fantastic story, right, to the consumers and stuff like that. And therefore Ohad has been working many years of thinking of black cod, and that's a great experience. It's not like it's a new species for the aquaculture society. It has been farmed for more than 10 years in Canada and the US. So it is a fairly well-known species. And we think the species is ready to go land-based and be farmed more places than just in North America. So that's why we're setting out doing that. And we found a great site in Holland for doing that. And that's absolutely fantastic. It's a great community in Holland with Wageningen University, Zealand, and all of those places where you really have a lot of supporting industry and very skilled people. So that's one thing. And the other thing that we really are thinking a lot about is all of the challenge we had with building the farms. So that's why we set out to create the Farm in a Box company, which is basically a standardized, much more cheaper way of building land-based systems and much simpler. So that's been what we've been working on for almost 1.5 years now, both companies. And it's been a fantastic journey, and we look forward to let you know much more about it later on.
And you've also got your project Farm in a Box, which is applying a kind of modular technology to land-based farming.
Yeah, exactly. That is to basically challenge the high capex cost, the long building times, like from when you set out with starting your project to you actually farming fish. It could easily be 5 years, right? It needs to go much faster, and it has to be a lot cheaper than it is today. And then the other thing is also it needs to be much easier to operate these systems. You've seen a lot of the issues is also getting skilled people, all of these things, right? These farms have to be much more easy to operate today.
And I think you've got a graphic which shows something about
Yeah, yeah,
Farm in a Box
we
as
can bring
well.
it
If we
up.
could maybe have that up. Fantastic, thanks.
Yeah, so the idea is basically, as you can see down in the corner, it is a system that can be put up fairly fast. The idea is, over time, we will develop different modules. Right now, we're just working on one module, but different modules of different sizes. And then there's going to be a little bit differences between the species, the salinity, the temperature, what is your target size of fish producing, and how much are you going to produce per year. If you want to, maybe you can go to the next slide. So basically, this is how we envision a farm in a box site looking like. Basically, containers with all of the key equipment inside, and then fish tanks that's built up really fast. These are built out of grain silos. It's a very simple technology. It can be shipped by containers. It's very easy to put all the prefabricated things inside. And then, I mean, a system like this, one unit can be done more or less 3 weeks, and there's no piping in the ground. And so it goes really fast. It's just a flat slab, and then you can basically start constructing it. And then another thing is, of course, because all of the systems are standardized. It's if you go to RAS farms around the world, they're all different. They're all new, little innovation here, little innovation here. We want to do our own pilot farms, like or demo farms, like the windmill industry is doing. Windmills are not just sold to customers when they come up with a new model. We want to run our own demo units. And what that also gives us a capability is to develop our own softwares and also apply much more AI than we've seen before in other parts of the process than where most of the AI efforts are today. And we think this, both with a very simple design and applying AI, it will make it much easier to operate these farms.
That's great.
Yeah, here's a little bit on the site we found in Zealand. It's a great location. We just came out with it 3 weeks ago, I think, and it's basically fry marine that used to be used for turbot, and we are taking all the turbot equipment out and be able to use that for farming black cod, and we can also use that site for our demo plant of farm in a box. So it's a fantastic venue. Yeah, and this is the black cod. This is the progress of black cod, right? We have the site. We have got the key permits on there. We got the import license, so we can have and farm the fish in Holland. We really have people on the team that knows a lot about black cod. As I said, it's not a new species to the aquaculture society. I mean, Paul was just talking about Patagonian toothfish, right? These kind of marine species have been explored a lot, and the community is getting so much better on it. Live feeds and all these kind of things. It's really impressive to see what's going on in the marine aquaculture space. Yeah, and yeah. So we are just, and it's me and Ohad that have been funding the project so far. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. And then a lot of other stuff too, right? But we can always talk about that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the hard lessons from working on aquaculture projects, and that includes obviously Atlantic Sapphire, which is probably one of the highest profile which you were involved with in the early stages. What kind of lessons did you draw from that development particularly?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we learned is that these construction projects are not easy, right? You start a project of $250 million, 44,000 square meters. And when we basically started the construction, went into that, we were probably 4 or 5 people in that team, right? And it's a huge undertaking and much bigger. And one thing is to do it in Denmark in a smaller scale. One other thing is to do it in a complete other country with its own culture, its own standards, its own permits, and its own ways of doing things. And that was actually much, much more challenging than we ever expected. And so what we kind of want to do in Farm in a Box is making those kind of construction related issues, if you don't have a huge team to execute this, it needs to be simple, it needs to be standardized, it needs to be something that you can apply rapidly, so you don't sit on and waiting for from you start to you 5 years later until you harvest your first fish, right?
So you don't have to kind of invent it as you go, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, not only inventing, but you have to build a team. You have to find the right construction partners. You have to all of these things. And by the end, I mean, you're not farming fish before you're 5 years in, and then the technology is already kind of outdated, right? I mean, what happened during 5 years in this space is incredible. What's going on, and you can see a lot of farms getting built now are very different from the farms that got built 5 years ago, right? So there's a huge learning. It's a great community to be in, and there's so much knowledge. And all of this investment that you talked about to start with is we're seeing so much in post-smolt. We're seeing in so many. I mean, the world market of RAS farms right now is probably around 2 billion euros a year getting invested into RAS farms, right? And that creates innovation and technology development. We just want to take it even a step further and try to industrialize this instead of having the same philosophy as building wastewater treatment plants.
Well, thanks, Thue. Paul, Swansea has got its own aquaculture facilities as well as carrying out research. You're rearing fish. Could you tell us something about the setup that you've got at the Centre for Sustainable Aquatic Research and what kind of species that you're dealing with?
Yeah, more than happy to. Thank you for the invite. So we're a centre of excellence at Swansea University. We've been around for about 14, 15 years. We're quite substantial facilities within a university context. The diagram that hopefully everybody can see there is just showing the different rooms. So we've got around 15 recirculating systems in around 13 laboratories. And we have tanks that are up to about 3 cubic meters, all the way down to your normal model organism racks for zebrafish and things along those lines. We have good quarantine facilities, and in general, we can house fish ranging from 8 degrees to 30 degrees and full salinity to fresh water and anywhere in between. We've also got a lot of algal biotechnology facilities, so we're doing a lot of work around the circular economy there, looking at taking wastes from agriculture, from anaerobic digestion, or wastes from aquaculture, and then growing and upscaling different microalgae to then be processed downstream for nutraceuticals, or downstream for things like omega-3s or astaxanthin and things like that. We have 3 main core missions. They are that we want to enhance the student experience, which I'll mention a bit later. We want to produce impactful papers, and we want to work with industry to help answer some of those industry related questions. So my role is somewhere between academia and industry in order to form a bridge between sometimes those disparate areas within society. In terms of the sort of work we do a lot of feeding trials. We're heavily involved in fish welfare and looking at ways to improve welfare through operational welfare indicators, such as with cleaner fish, which we've developed and are now used within the Maui Academy. Along with that, we're busy developing shrimp welfare indicators at the moment, because, as you know, they've been put onto the sentience bill within the UK. So we want industry to try and get ahead of the curve, where legislation may come down the pipeline, or consumer trends may change within crustacean welfare as well. So we're looking at developing welfare indicators for that species as well.
Your students at Swansea have a great opportunity to get really hands-on in terms of aquaculture and all forms of aquatic species. Do you see does that kindle an enthusiasm for working in the industry? Do you see many sort of go on from Swansea to work in some shape or form
I
in
mean,
aquaculture?
definitely. We tend to, at an undergraduate level, we train around 50 students a year. They have a couple of months in CSAR where they're answering an industry-related question, such as different feed types or different ways of delivering feed to a specific organism. Within that group, you have students who are super keen to go into the aquaculture area, and you have other students that might be against aquaculture, but they have the opportunity to at least learn and see how people care for the animals, how welfare is really important within the systems and things along those lines. So yeah, after the undergraduate level, I mean, we've trained hundreds of undergraduate students in aquaculture. Many of those then end up doing dissertations within CSAR. They go on to get industry-sponsored MRes within CSAR as well. And then we have, many PhDs that come out of CSAR as well, and they work in a wide range of different areas within aquaculture or outside of aquaculture, including policy and advocates and things along those lines.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction, Paul. Trond, salmon evolution is described as a hybrid flow-through system. Can you tell us about your facility and what the hybrid flow-through means?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. So, what we as you say, we use what we call a hybrid flow-through system, and basically what we try to do is to capture the benefits in a full flow-through system and a RAS system where you have high recirculation. So for us, it's all about basically three things. It's first to provide a good enough environment so that you can take out the full growth potential of the salmon. Secondly, it's all about reducing the operational risk to a minimum, and then finally, it's about, in case something happens, to be able to contain it. So what we do is that we use quite a lot of water at all times, because we see that as water is an asset if you have it, and then it's easier to maintain good water quality, and it's also has a risk mitigating effect. So about 1/3 of the water in our system is a constant flow of new water. And then we aeronate, and then we recycle up to 2/3 of the water, but we don't go sort of higher than that because we want to sort of avoid the most advanced water filtration system. So the only thing we do is that we aeronate for CO2 and we add oxygen. So very common principles. And finally, our system is built up in a way that each tank is an individual biozone, so that you don't have any water sharing between the tanks and reducing the risk of cross-contamination. So that is sort of in simple terms this hybrid system. It's the technology has been tried and tested for decades in the smolt industry. For many years, but obviously the real innovation in what we do is the scaling of things. So this is a huge facility, and also the level of automation I think is next level to sort of what's been done before.
And what have the results been like so far? How have the salmon done well in this system?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started construction in May 2020. We stocked the first fish in March 2022. So phase 1, which is fully completed, has a capacity of 8,000 tons. We've been operating it now for 2.5 years. Now we are on the 17th batch. So we are sort of producing at scale. We have gotten very good biological results. Obviously, as when you are doing innovation at scale, you always encounter challenges. But the big picture is that this has been working very well, and also the biological results that we have achieved, both when it comes to mortality, when it comes to product quality, key KPIs such as feed conversion rate, all are extremely good, and we are now in a stage where we have a very stable operation. We have we are in an operational phase. We are sort of harvesting regularly, and also in the first half of this year, we became profitable for the first time, which was a huge milestone for the company, and actually also had farming margins on par with some of the best conventional farmers. So I think for us, it's never been clearer that this is working, and this is part of the future in both developing and growing this industry.
And what happens next? Are you looking to scale up further?
Absolutely. So the project we have in Norway, phase 1 is a little less than 25% of the total project. So that is fully operational now. Now we started construction of phase 2 in August. So that will add another 10,000 tons of production capacity, which will take it to 18,000 tons, and that's sort of a very important milestone for us, because then we get an operation where we have critical mass, and also bring the company into a position where we actually have the capacity to grow organically and not be dependent upon sort of securing additional funding every time you are growing. So now it's all about executing on phase 2, getting that into operation. We plan to stock the first fish in phase 2 in March 2026. So time flies by, and it's in a few months it's only a year from a year forward. So all about phase 2. And then phase 3 a little bit down the road, and in parallel we are working on sort of other expansion opportunities.
Okay, thanks. So let's throw open some questions to the whole panel. Maybe we could start by looking at what's driving this trend to larger and larger facilities being built, particularly for grow out. I mean, we've seen fish farming taking place in pens at sea, and obviously for many hundreds of years in small pond and raceway farms. But we're now looking at very big capacity plants being built around the world, and it's in some cases in places not associated very much with fish farming previously. What's kind of driving that? Maybe Thue, you could lead on that one. Why are we seeing a lot of money and effort being put into these big facilities?
I mean, you can even hear Trond, right? He needs to get to 18,000 tons to really get the benefit of having one site with the infrastructure and everything. And he's even located in Norway, where you can get fish boxes easy, you can get your feed easy, you can get veterinary easy on site. All of the infrastructure is around him, right? Whereas if you, for example, go to Safari, if you go to China, if you go to a lot of other places, you basically have to create that whole thing around you, and that requires size. Right? You really have to, if you need to be price competitive, which you of course have to when you're producing more or less a commodity, which salmon is, or other main market species, it requires a lot of scale to be able to do that cost efficiently, right? So that's of course why you're pushing. You have to push these, and if you if you need to go and get big money for the base project, you need a big organization to do that. It all packs on, and then it just pushes the systems towards bigger and bigger, because you need to be able to support all of that to make the company really profitable. And I mean, just getting a site there, right, can be in the millions of dollars, just getting the permits, for example, in the US or in many other countries, right? So then that naturally brings the project up to a certain size, because you can't have that investment being too big a chunk of your total investment.
Any other thoughts on that scale?
I would just add to that as well that when you scale, you have the ability to have a much longer viewpoint and weather the storms when prices change and fluctuate on a year-to-year basis. If you're somewhere in the middle sort of size, then that profit margin can be quickly moved into a debt if prices of the actual product that you're selling fluctuate over time. So I think moving at scale and producing larger and larger RAS systems, once they're profitable, and that profit margin can, the ability to actually move with the markets is open much closer.
Trond, I guess from what you were saying, that you need to grow to really make the best of the technology that you have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what has been said, and obviously now phase 1 is profitable in our system, but you need a lot of infrastructure. You need to build up an organization. So you need a certain scale to like have this critical mass where you get into like really great profitability, and also where you get into a stage where you have an organic sort of growth capacity as well, and that has been very important for us. And I think if you just look at the conventional industry, Norway is producing 50% of global salmon, and one of the success factors has been obviously scale and the very efficient value chain that you have established, and that's why Norway is the cost leader in conventional, and I think land-based also. If you're sort of going for a concept where you are competitive on cost with sort of the conventional industry, you need to think scale, and because you need harvesting stations, you cannot. Then it's a volume play. So.
And Robert, that's also why we went for black cod, right? Because it's a niche market, it's really high value. So you can either go really scale in a commodity and do exactly as Trond is talking about, or you can go really small and really target a niche market with really high prices, right? It's kind of in between. It's really difficult to be between those two chairs. To get really good profits. Like you're seeing Trond now has profits, you see Danish Salmon, you've seen Skagen Salmon, you're seeing companies having profits, but it's not super profits, right? It's not like payback times of 5 years. It's payback at the scale that now it's in 10 and 20 years, and that's not really that good for many investors, because aquaculture is still looked at as risky, right? You really need to get into some good profits for be able to handle that risk that investors see, right?
So we also had a question about what are the biggest production challenges, and that the audience member who asked that question gave a couple of suggestions, either disease outbreaks, which can affect fish in land-based farming, and also what the industry calls off-flavor contamination, geosmin, which is, for anybody in the audience who doesn't know, is a kind of bacterial contamination which doesn't harm the fish or the humans, but it does create a very kind of earthy flavor, which is not what most people want when they have their fish, and that can be quite difficult to get rid of once it gets established. So what's kind of top of the list in terms of the challenges to production? And anybody want to jump in on that one?
I can do. I think I mean, at least when you look at rice farms, it's not that diseases are not that a big issue, right? It's very little. It's a very small volume of water that you really have to disinfect. a lot of places like Sapphire or other places have water sources that you don't even need to disinfect because there's nothing coming in. And if you have good biosecurity around your farm, there's almost no diseases, right? You then have had issues in many RAS farms with H2S, which is a gas that gets produced inside the system itself that can be an issue or can cause mortalities, but that's not a disease. No parasites and stuff like that. And on the off flavor, of course it is an issue. It is already an issue in lakes and some places, or even open net farms can have a little bit of geosmin. So it is an industry-wide problem. But it's of course very important in RAS where you have high recirculation degree and you don't get rid of it, right? It's produced by the bacteria. It's actually some of the compounds that that most people can smell really well, because we think that back a million years ago, that was a way we could find water in dry areas. We could actually smell it. That's why we're so sensitive to it. But maybe, Trond, you don't have problems with all flavors, right? So I don't know how it is in a hybrid flow through with parasites and diseases.
No, I think to add to that, since we use so much water, taste or its off taste is not an issue at all. But obviously, as you point out, the more water you use, the sort of more challenging with respect to disinfection and so forth. So obviously that is something we are extremely focused on, and I think it also starts with smolt. So you need to make sure that you have a good operation and a good quality the smolt, and obviously on the smolt side, those are mostly produced in RAS system. So getting a healthy fish in our hybrid system, we filter the water, intake water for particles. We also disinfect the water with UV on its way in. So I think definitely you should be able to sort of operate with a much lower risk, but there's also will always be a risk that something will get through that you're not able to infect your way out of. But again, if you have a healthy environment, if you have a healthy fish, then normally that wouldn't be a problem. And obviously one of the main benefits, like for example in our system, is that we don't have to deal with the sea lice. So then you avoid all this handling and delousing of the fish, and then you have a stronger fish that is more sort of robust and can sort of withstand if something were to sort of come up.
But I guess it's also easier if you ever have a problem, right? That's at least how it is in RAS, right? If you ever have a problem, it's much easier to give a treatment or whatever when you have the fish in a tank compared to when they are in an open net cage, right? And you have to get well boats and everything. You can much easier deal with whatever problem you would ever get, right? And I think that's one of the great advantages of land-based is that when you have these kind of things, it's so much easier to handle these things when it's on land, and you're not, is there a storm coming, you can still do whatever treatment you need to do. It doesn't matter, right? So you have much more control, and you have much more tools in your toolbox than you would have in a sea cage.
Paul, you mentioned your role as sort of connecting academia and industry. What kind of problems are industry coming to you to say, this is something we need a solution to?
I think the area that's fascinating for us is that fish as a group of organisms are so diverse and so different in their needs that one system doesn't fit all. So for instance, stocking densities can be very, very wildly depending on the species. So things like tilapia, their aggression, if they're in lower densities, skyrockets, but if they're in higher densities, that territoriality breaks down. So their welfare is actually, improved by higher densities. So we often find within industry, it depends on the level of maturity of the company, of course, but people just starting out, they want something off the shelf, like a farm in a box or things along those those lines. And then the more mature companies, what they find is they're firefighting a lot. So they really do value research. They value longer term research questions being answered, but on a day-to-day basis, it's whichever emergency is coming along for those couple of months, disease A or disease B, or in holes in nets, that sort of things. So in terms of RAS, in terms of the production challenges, there's so many individual components that can go wrong. So it's a case of, you may have the environmental risks in cages, out in cages and things like that, and you may have much greater control over them within RAS farming, but that needs to be coupled with really clear standard operating procedures, a good management system, excellent communication between the staff at different levels to avoid those catastrophic challenges, redundancy within systems, all of those sorts of things. So I think in summary, the challenges of RAS are no different than the challenges that you would have in any major system that you're producing animals in. So there's a lot of parallels with agriculture, a lot of parallels with different sectors like that. Yeah. Disease, again, that's been mentioned. There's much lower risk of disease, but it's obviously still something that is extremely important, and good sourcing of seedlings, good sourcing of different products coming into your systems is really, really crucial. And yeah, so that's my view on that area.
We've got a question from one of the attendees about standardization. Can the industry be standardized when different species have different requirements? And I guess that links to another potential question, which is, are we going to see, particularly if we look at RAS farming, recirculating aquaculture systems, we've got a lot of different technologies out there, but are we going to end up with one becoming the standard, the norm that everybody will use, or are the needs of different sites and different farming approaches and species just so different that we won't see that? In a sense, the classic thing people like to talk about is VHS and Betamax in terms of video, and only one succeeded, a bit like Microsoft and Apple compared with all the people that came before. But is RAS like that, or are we going to see a lot of different technologies continuing? And any thoughts on that, anybody?
Yeah, I think it's if you can compare fish farming to anything, you compare it to farming, right? When you go down to the supermarket and buy tomatoes, you buy tomatoes from Morocco from fields, then you buy them from Spain. In winter, you buy them from greenhouses in Holland. Then you buy local Danish produced in my case, right? In the summertime, done in very different ways, right? There will always be new technologies coming in. Some of them will succeed, some of them won't. But it is a diversity in farming of very many different methods, and also with ESG and consumers and everything, we are seeing a diversification in the farming methods and stuff like that. And I think it's the same for agriculture. Yeah, I do not expect that we will not see tilapia farming in lakes and in open ponds, but maybe some of it will in some places where there's a big local demand for live fish and stuff like that. You'll see more RAS farms. Same with salmon, right? Maybe the open net cages are going to go to more closed cages with time, but very close to, but you're still going to have the big advantages of having the hybrid flow-throughs and the RAS farms. And it all's going to depend on economy and the numbers and regulations, right? And consumer perspectives. So there's so many variables in what's going to shape the future and what's going to come. And so that's but when you look at across if you only talk about RAS farms, yes, there's a lot of different technologies out there, but the basis of a RAS farm is very similar. I mean, if you look at the different concepts, it's some particle removal, it's some type of biofilter, it's some type of degasser, and some type of disinfection, and some type of oxygen injection. It's those 5 points. They're more or less solved in very similar ways. It's looked like that for 40 years. So yes, there's maybe going to be different things. In Farm in a Box, of course, we believe that this can be standardized much more. It can be done way cheaper than it is today. But is one system going to win over the other? I don't know. I mean, we for sure want to be, but if I know the aquaculture sector well, it's as soon as things move and technologies improve, there's a lot of good companies out there that's going to move too. So yeah, it is a really interesting industry to work with, and it's a lot of fun.
Any more thoughts on that? Are you seeing different approaches, Paul? I mean, I guess you've got different RAS systems which will operate slightly differently from each other. Is it a case of people will be going for kind of tailor-made solutions to their specific problems, or are we going to see one technology succeeding?
I agree with what's already been said. It's a case of whatever fits for that country, that region, that client. Things like urban aquaculture on a small scale, where it's very close to market, and it's a product that's in high demand, but currently are being imported or currently don't meet the customers' needs. I think often what the trends within consumer preferences needs to be taken into account when it comes to planning which species you're going for, what's being sold alongside that species. Is that species being sold as, hasn't been exposed to heavy metals or things along those lines within the shrimp industry? All of those things need to be taken into account. Is whether or not there's some sort of accreditation going to be linked to that particular product. Is it going to be organic? So therefore, does it have an impact on what sort of feeds you're having to give, the cost of those feeds? Whether you're going for a niche market within a niche species is part of that all comes back to system design again.
Mm. That leads on to another interesting question that we've received, which is, do consumers have a realistic idea about what aquaculture is, and how are their preferences? I guess for a lot of people, they'll see fish on the supermarket shelf. Are they concerned about whether it's been caught in a trawl net or whether it's been grown at sea or grown in a land-based facility? Trond, Salmon Evolution has got some a good level of price. You've got some good quality fish, and the price you've been getting in the market. Does the end consumer know that it's coming through a flow-through system? Is that something which you'd want to sell? In other words, is that a positive, or is it really more just saying it's good quality and the price is competitive?
I definitely think that there's a huge opportunity here, and we are seeing more and more awareness around this sort of in the market. Actually, last week we had a demo in sort of a high-end store in Oslo, the capital, and you are seeing that sort of people are getting more and more sort of aware of these issues, and more sort of focused on sort of the sustainability part of it. At the same time, and that's been very important for us, is to, when you are scaling an operation like this, at least for us, we don't harvest every week, so it can go weeks from every time we harvest, and then it's sort of how do you build the market for your product, and obviously one of the benefits we have had is that it looks like a salmon, it tastes like a salmon, and it's like fully competitive with the conventional salmon. So our customers are sort of not only like end customers, but it can be smokehouses, it can be processors, distributors that sort of can use our salmon in parallel or together with sort of a lot of different other types of from other suppliers, because the product in itself is sort of fully on par quality-wise with conventional sort of product. But I definitely believe that there is a big potential here. But then again, to really develop that, then you need regularity. You need to be there every week. You need to communicate the story, and this takes time. So in the meantime, you have to have a sort of offtake, because when you're harvesting hundreds of tons a week, or even maybe thousands of tons a week, then you cannot start looking for customers when the fish is sort of stunned. You need to have a big offtake operation. So I think it's a balance, and a sort of gradually building a market position, while at the same time making sure that you get a good pricing on the products you have.
Paul, do you think the fact that something is produced in a land-based facility rather than, say, shrimp imported from Ecuador or Vietnam, or salmon raised in the sea, is that a negative for consumers? Is that a positive, or maybe consumers actually don't really know or care one way or the other?
So a lot of consumers, they just want to look at what the price is. Budgets are tight. People want, if they want to eat fish isn't the cheapest to start with. So you have that section of society. You have other sections of society who would like to still have that value for money, but also be reassured that this particular product wasn't grown in polluted waters where, you know, heavy metals can be absorbed into the organisms, such as within the shrimp farming industry in certain parts of the world. There's trends for lots of things. Another one of those trends is that some areas within certain countries are eating less and less fish, so that's a challenge. Whereas other countries in a global market, they're starting to get more spare cash, so they can diversify and maybe buy that imported product. So it's such a complex situation. I don't think I can say one way or the other that there's specific trends globally, but there's definitely trends within certain societies in certain countries. And again, it comes back to being able to offer a product. If you're going to be profitable, it's to offer a product that can be sold at the price that you can make it for. And if you can't make it for a price for a market, then it's not going to be profitable.
Thue, any thoughts on that?
I think Sapphire has kind of shown a little bit the way here, right? With the Blue House salmon brand. In the US, it's quite successful, and it's getting a lot of traction, and people know the story. It's very easy to communicate, right? That RAS systems are like greenhouses for salmon. They're for the Blue House. It's American made and everything, and you can get an extra price. But as Trond says, it's really important that you have the product every week, and that's one of the things in scale too, right? That you need to do that, or you at least have set up your small system. You have to think about that all the way from the start, that you need to be able to supply the fish every week. Otherwise, chefs or supermarkets are not going to like that you're out of the market. Oh, we're not harvesting this week. Yeah, but I have a campaign now, you know. But one of the things I think that could be really interesting in the EU, I think where US is also a lot better, is that, for example, at the fishmonger, you have to write, you know, what country is it from, the Latin name of the species. Give the consumer a little bit more information. If you have to look at a package today to see whether a shrimp has been bottom trawled or it has been farmed, you really have to go down in the supermarket. And if you're buying it at a fishmonger, you have no chance of knowing it. They have to be able to answer it by law, but you don't look at it, right? Where in the US, it says the country of origin, where it's been, is it farmed, is it trawled, what are the different things? And I think the EU could do a lot better on regulating the communication to the consumer, you know, the size of the communication and stuff like that. So consumers actually could, I think many consumers on shrimp, probably don't know whether the shrimp is farmed or is caught. I mean, it's just shrimp to them, right? You could put some regulations in where it is to create more awareness, and that would also make people more aware of aquaculture, right? That we actually are farming a lot of fish species, and half of the seafood we eat now is farmed. And I'm not sure that the average consumer is actually aware of that at all yet. But we could do a lot more in the EU to do that.
So I'm conscious of time. We've got a couple of important questions to look at. One is, what are the key restrictions on growth for land-based fish farming, and does that include skills? Because running a facility with this kind of technology does require some expertise, and it's important to get that right. Any thoughts on that from your point of view, Trond? What do you think would be the restrictions on either your own company or other companies wanting to kind of replicate what you're doing? How far could that grow?
I think a couple of things. Obviously, in today's market, obviously capital is a big constraint for most companies. But I think at the same time, as this industry grows, as the technology is getting more and more widely accepted, and you have sort of more and more data points, then I think this with people is going to become a real issue. And doing this at scale on land, and sort of you obviously need the people with the biological competence, but this is huge and advanced processing plants. So you need also people with technical competence, engineers, technicians, and sort of I think sort of to succeed, you need to be able to sort of merge the biological side with the technical side, and these are huge plants and facilities. So people is gonna be extremely important, and then I think locations and getting licenses, because that's not gonna be easier in the years to come. I think, and you see in many countries, it can take a very long time to get the permits you need, and there's a lot of interests and stakeholders that has an opinion on what you do. So I would say those three probably.
Okay, Paul, and what could potentially hold back growth around the world? I mean, capital, I guess, is an obvious one.
At a global scale, then it's wherever the long-term thinking is, where you've got an integration between government policymakers, business environment, and the academia side of things to work together to actually make something happen long term. I think countries like Iceland and Norway are way ahead of the curve because they have the established aquaculture systems within government, within business. The opportunity for a place like Iceland and Norway to switch in part or to increase production across to RAS seems very logical. I think the challenges are going to come when it's, for instance, outside of Scotland. For instance, Scotland would be included that as well, where aquaculture is placed as a really important part of the rural economy, and especially in some of the more remote locations where it is a big employer of the local population. Places like the UK and Wales, it's going to be more challenging because there's not that established finfish aquaculture area within those two countries, and similar within many countries around the world, where if somebody invests in an extremely large RAS system, it's going to be very difficult to find the right caliber of staff within those countries, basically because that industry hadn't existed in that form at that point. So no doubt many countries will learn from what Norway and Iceland are doing, and then take note of what worked and what didn't work. But it's trying to get catch up with some of the countries that are already vertically, some of the companies within those countries are already vertically integrated with feed manufacturing, with feed production, with sourcing of the fish, with the growing of the fish, with the markets. So it's trying to compete with those countries as well.
And Thue, thoughts on what are the big sort of limiting factors?
No, I agree very much, and that's what we are kind of trying to solve with Farm in a Box, right? It's the fast construction. It makes the construction easier. It's the capex. It needs, when money is scarce and you need to have good returns for investors, the farms obviously have to come down in price. And its operations, the farms needs to be much simpler and easy to operate than they are today. So you're not so limited by the enormous amount of very skilled people that needs to run the farms today, right? And that's important. And of course, as Trond says, it is especially when you are using a lot of water, then it is a challenge to get the licenses. And I agree with Paul very much that Norway and Iceland, because you have the industry, and Chile and places like that are ahead of the curve in relation to putting up regimes and stuff like that. But of course, if you do RAS farming, it gets easier to get these kind of permits, right? That it is to do hybrid flu. But yeah. It is doable, but it takes a long time depending on the country if the regulators are not used to regulate fish farms, right? That's always how it is.
Okay, and if we could just quickly go around the panel, the industry in 25 years, is it, maybe I should take that almost into a yes/no question. Are we going to see a large established industry, or is it going to in 25 years, or maybe in 25 years' time, is it still going to be sort of fairly niche? Paul, any thoughts on that?
I think, like a lot of industries, given that time frame, you're probably likely to end up with several huge companies, maybe integrated within RAS and cage aquaculture, who have taken that on board, and they'll be globally massive, producing huge amounts of fish. But then I think you're also going to see a proliferation of the smaller niche RAS systems around the world, tailoring to local markets, tailoring to culturally linked species of importance, especially as areas within the oceans, unless they're going to suddenly start getting less degraded, then the cultural fishing pressure on some of those species is just going to continue. So I can see a proliferation of small scale RAS for high value products as well.
Trond, 25 years from now, how do you see this industry?
Yeah, at least speaking for the salmon industry, I definitely think that if you look 25 years ahead, then land-based is a big part of the way we produce salmon. And to add to that, I think the lead times for new project is long, and they're not, if you look like sort of in the near to short term, or I'll say over the next 5 years, probably not so much. But I think as you get more and more companies sort of getting up to, call it a base volume or a base size, then eventually scaling will become much easier also. And I think you will get to, at some point, you will get to an inflection point where the curve sort of moves in a much steeper direction. So for sure, in 25 years, this is quite a big industry, I dare to say.
Thue, I know for venture capitalists, 25 years is a long it's a long time. But any thoughts on what the industry could look like in that kind of time frame?
I mean, aquaculture is the fastest growing industry within the food sector, right? It is growing really fast. I know that we talk about there's some places that eat less fish, but the general tendency is that when people get richer and the world is getting richer, people eat more seafood, and we will see a increasing demand. And from a technology point of view, we are seeing so many things getting developed. There's AI coming in, there's close containment in the sea. We are seeing offshore farms coming. We are seeing so many things, and we think, of course, land-based is, I mean, my personal opinion, and that's why I've spent 20 years of my life on it, is I think that RAS is going to be a huge part of the solution, but that's not saying that that's going to be the only solution out there. And we're going to see a huge growth in the sector. So I'm very bullish on the sector.
That's great. Well, thank you to all of our panel, and thanks to the audience for sticking with us for an hour of, I think, what's been a really interesting conversation. I think we've learned that there are a lot of challenges to land-based, but it has a lot of opportunities as well. And I think one key message to take away is that scale is going to be really important, both in terms of the scale of individual plants, but also the scale of the industry, because the bigger the industry is, the more infrastructure there'll be there to support it, the more people there'll be with the skills. And I think we're also looking at what looks set to remain a fairly diverse industry, because it's not a case of one size fits all. People are going to be raising a number of different species in a number of different contexts. And you might be going to a restaurant where a RAS facility next door is producing your fish, or you may be going to a supermarket where you're getting the results from a huge farm which is in another country. So I think there's a number of different routes that people are going down, but it does look like this branch of the industry, which in some ways it's been around for a long time, but in other ways is very new. Certainly looks like it has a very interesting future ahead of it. I'd like to say so thanks again to our panel, Paul Howes, Trond Schaug-Pettersen, and Thue Holm. And I'd like to say thank you to the audience for being part of this. And thanks a lot.